येन चित्तस्य पदेन वाचां मलं शरीरस्य पर्यकेन योपाकरोतं प्रपरमुनीनां पतञ्जलिं प्राञ्जलिरानतोऽस्मि आबाहुविशाखारं शङ्खचक्रास्यधारणं सहस्रशिरसिपुष्पेतं प्रणमामि पतञ्जलिं गुरुर्ब्रह्मा गुरुर्विष्णु गुरुर्देवो महेश्वरः गुरुसाक्षात् परब्रह्म तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। हरिः ओम्। So we are on the topic of chitta parikarma, which means, as we saw last time, the cleansing, purifying and so on of the chitta. So that is the topic. And then here there is a series of sutras on how to cleanse, purify, so different ways to achieve the same thing. And again, so the first one that we saw last time was 1.33, which was about Maitri, Karuna, Mudita, Upeksha and so on. And last time we had almost completed 1.34, which was pracchardanavidhāraṇābhyāṃ va prāṇasya. So the term va suggests that it is an alternative. So there are multiple alternative ways suitable to different people at different times. So depending on the situation, one could choose the way to cleanse and purify the chitta. And last time specifically, we had looked at pracchardanavidhāraṇābhyāṃ va prāṇasya, where we had seen what is prachardanam. Where it says posthasya vayoho nasikaputabhyāṃ prayatna visheshat. So we had seen prayatna visheshat vamanam. So specifically, this is a pranic exhalation, right? Posthasya vayu means abdominal air in some sense. So I won't go into the details again because we have covered that already. So where we left off was we had sort of reminded you of the relation between the air and prana and the mind. Right? So we had also mentioned the shloka from Hatha Yoga Pradipika that said Sriyavate chalam chittam nischale nischala bhavet. So where the air or the breath wavers, the mind also wavers. Where it does not waver, the mind does not waver, and so on. So now let's continue from there. And there is this extract from Vachaswati Mishra's work which sort of elaborates on that. So let's look at that. And after that we'll close 1.34 and move on to the next sutra. So it says Trividaha pranayamaha chittasya sthitim ekagrataya nibadnati. So the three pranayamas, okay, which is here refers to Rechaka, Puraka, Kumbhaka. What do they do? Chittasya sthitim ekagrataya nibadnati. So they tie the chitta to sthiti. If you remember, we had said Prashant Iyengar sthitihi in a previous sutra. Where now that chitta, the chitta nadi, so to speak, is in a Prashanta Vahanam state where it is flowing placidly. It is not wavering. Okay? So this is sthiti. And ekagrataya. So through the ekagrata or with ekagrata, the pranayamas are able to bind the chitta to that particular state. Which again reminds us of the relation between prana, breath and the chitta. Now let's see how. Okay? Sarvasam indriya vrittinam pranavritti purvakatvat. So this is a very sort of important insight. Okay? Because all the indriya vrittis, so all the states of the indriyas, and again to remind you, indriyas do not only mean the sense organs in terms of the eye, ear, nose or the motor organs. It is the entire indriya pranali, right from the sense organ to the mechanisms that bind it to the mental organ. Right? So the indriya and the aspects of the chitta that deal with the indriya. Okay. So now sarvasam, of all the indriya vrittis, which means all the states of the indriyas, prāṇavritti purvakatva, they are filled or they have a direct correspondence with the prāṇavrittis. And therefore, when we act on the prana and there is some transformation in the prāṇavritti, in turn there is a transformation in the indriya vritti. And therefore, the aspects of the chitta that is related to the indriyas, right, they get acted upon. And then the chitta gets transformed into whatever sthiti or ekagrata state that we sort of desire to attain. So here we are getting a very clear indication about why the pracchardanavidhāraṇābhyāṃ prāṇasya, that has an effect on the chitta that we want to achieve. Why is that leading to chitta parikarma? Now, manaprāṇayoho svavyāpāre parasparam eka yoga kshematvat. Okay? So let's stop here. So the mind and the prana, the manaprāṇayoho svavyāpāre, in their own activities, parasparam eka yoga kshematvat. So they are in some sense taking care of each other, the mana and prana. So what is yoga kshema? Yoga kshema means anagatanayanam agata rakshanam. Okay, so let's say yoga kshema in the daily business of life means earning wealth. That is yoga. So anagata anayanam, bringing in what we don't have, so earning wealth. Agata rakshanam, whatever wealth we have, taking care of that. So for example, in India, the life insurance corporation, LIC, says yoga kshemam vahamyaham. Okay, it says okay, we take care of you by sort of taking care of the wealth and those aspects. So now mana and prana are, their duty is paraspara yoga kshemam. So the prana is doing yoga kshema for the mana, the mind. The mana is doing yoga kshema for the prana. So then what happens? Manaprāṇayoho svavyāpāre paraspara yoga kshematvat kshiyamānaha prānaha. When the prana gets attenuated, right, when the force of the prana gets reduced through this pracchardhanam and vidharanam. Okay? So this heavy activity of the breath and the prana is reduced by the specific pranayamic exhalation and retention. Kshiyamānaha prānaha samastendriya vritti nirodha dvarena chittasya ekagratayaṃ prabhavati. So when the prana, its force is reduced, okay, in the sense that the activity is reduced, samasta indriya vritti nirodha dvarena, that leads to the entire indriya vrittis, the prominent presence or sort of the exalted state that the sense organs tend to take for themselves, that gets reduced. Okay? So the nirodha dvarena, by that restraint that happens. So it's not being actively restrained. So the yogi is not saying, okay, let me restrain the indriya, let me restrain the indriya. The yogi is actually working on the pranayamic exhalation that automatically has an effect of reducing the exalted state or the prominent outward state of the indriya vritti, and therefore chittasya ekagratayaṃ prabhavati. So the chitta goes towards ekagrata. Okay, so the chitta gets sort of initiated to go towards ekagrata. So now we are further understanding the exact mechanism in which this sutra is actually operating. Okay. Then samasta dosha kshayakaritvam cha asya agame shruyate. So now this is again interesting. So if you look at the agamas and the Upanishads and the Shruti, a lot of the Yoga Upanishads talk about how pranayama destroys the papa. So the papa is in, let's say, sins, and the resultant samskaras and the vasanas that have been deposited in our karmashara, through pranayama that gets purified. So here the Vachaspati Mishra is saying, in addition to whatever has been described, in addition to the chitta getting oriented towards ekagrata, the samasta dosha kshaya also happens. Okay, so because the doshas go, the tendency of the chitta to come away from the yogic path, that also gets reduced. Okay? Why is that essential? Because we are talking about chitta parikarma. So this is all about cleansing of the chitta. Okay? So this needs to have a long-lasting effect, not a temporary effect. So therefore he is saying not only the prana getting attenuated for the moment takes the chitta to the ekagrata direction, but even from a long-lasting, long-term point of view, there is a dosha kshaya that is happening. So the entire chitta is getting clean as it is. So going forward also, its tendency towards getting polluted, so to speak, that also is reduced through this pracchardanavidhāraṇābhyāṃ va prāṇasya. And now we understand how exactly it works.
The sutra which is mentioning that by a particular kind of pranayama, the mind stuff is purified. If the mind is purified, what is it? What is pure mind? What is cleansed mind? See, when you wash your clothes and you say, my clothes are now clean, that means what? Only the dirt has gone. All that dirt is gone. And that's how the cloth is clean, the floor is clean, the thing is clean. With reference to mind, if the mind is clean, what is it? If the mind is clean, one of the most important characteristics of such mind is the mind is quiet. The mind is serene. The mind is steadied. So, we say transparent mind. If the mind is clean, it's a transparent mind. When the mind is transparent, is it something like glass, look through condition? So, when the mind is cleansed, it is white and serene. And this is what we are looking for a meditative process or for eka tattva bhyasaha. To be having that pursuit, the mind is unsteady, the mind is rambling, the mind is turbulent, mind is fugitive. You cannot be embarking upon eka tattva bhyasaha. So it needs a steady mind. It needs a quiet mind. It needs a serene, quiet mind. Then only the eka tattva bhyasa will be possible. And if the eka tattva bhyasa is possible, you are countering vyādhi, adi, antarayas and vikshepas. So this is how it has to be related. Then here just now we explained the relationship between indriyas and the prana. Now indriyas means don't just take as 5 phonative organs and 5 cognitive organs. Our embodiment is nothing but collocation, assembly of indriyas of several aspects, several kinds. Everything is indriya within us. We are nothing but assembly of several indriyas. Now, in English you don't get this word. They will say either the organs, senses. Now, indriyas come to everywhere. Jnanendriya, karmendriya, manasaḥ, even about physiology, pachanendriya, viṣayavatī, śvatanendriya. So all are indriyas. Unlike in English, senses and organs. Now these are indriyas. At this point you should know again the word indriyas. They all celestial aspects within our embodiment are held by the gift of indriyas, by the body of indriyas. That's why they are called indriyas. Why indriyas? Like we say Bharat, Bharatiya, America, American, Europe, European, Australia, Australian, Japan, Japanese. So In Sanskrit, the suffix Bharat, Bharatiya, Maharashtra, Maharashtriya. Here, similarly, Indra, Indriya, it is a suffix. Indra is the king of all gods. Indra is king of all gods. All superhuman forces. Gods means superhuman forces. So these are all places for various deities to reside, various deities to preside over. Our eyes are presided over by Aditya Devata. Our mind is presided over by Soma Devata, Chandra Devata, the moon god. So various organs are presided over by a celestial force, or various arms, Indriyas, are dwelling place of celestial forces. So the celestial forces indwell within us. Wherever they indwell, that is called Indriya. That is why it is called Indriya. Now, prana and Indriya has a relationship. If you understand prana as a vital energy, see what happens when the vital energy is weakened due to old age. The prana is said to be becoming weak for older people, decrepit, very old people, ripe old people. What are ripe old people? Everything in them is disempowered, weakened. That's the old age. If nothing is weakened, just because you are 70, 80, 90, 100, 110, 120, it doesn't become old age. All our faculties, all our organs, all our senses, when they are weakened, that is called old age. It has nothing to do with the age. Because somebody can be old at the age of 30, 40, 20, 30. Somebody cannot be old at the age of 60, 70. Somebody cannot be old at the age of 80, 90, 100. When the Indriyas, when various organs within us, when they are enfeebled, weakened, that is the sign of old age and decay. Now, why does it happen? Our pranas are weak. That's why we say with reference to old people, the pranas have become kshina. The pranas have become weak. Now, weakness we always look at as a negative aspect. Not a good health, not lesser health. Kshina word means even for yoga, although yoga is an energy manifestation, the prana has to do something which in psyche we say weakening. The mind has to be restrained. In English we say the mind is restrained. How will it be restrained? Unless it loses some potential of activity. If it is vibrating with activity potential, the mind won't restrain. So in English you don't have the word. The mind is not weakened to be going for restraint. However, kshina can be used word. The Sanskrit word of kshina. So that means activity is brought down. Activities are brought down. It's not a helpless, hopeless condition that the activities are brought down, which happens in decrepency old age. So, the prana can invigorate the indriyas or pacify the indriyas. So that's why the prana has close relationship with all the indriyas. It can be Jnanendriya, Karmendriya, Pachanendriya and various indriyas. You can't say yoga is the state of mind, but all the organs are working with turbulence. It is not possible. You can't have restraint of chitta with agitation in the digestive system, agitation in the coronary system, agitation in the circulatory system. We can't imagine the restraint of the mind with agitation, with tumult in various systems of our body. So chitta vritti nirodha implies the restraint in all the various systems in our body. And the prana is closely related to every area. It can accelerate and decelerate. It can do the management of the indriyas functioning. Hyperactivity to hypoactivity on one hand. On the other hand, sublimity, nobility to ignobility on the other hand. See, an old man's mind might be weak. It doesn't mean that when the mind is weak, old person is sublime. Old person's mind can be ignoble, but weak. So prana works on both the fronts. One is qualitative aspect and the other one is quantitative aspect. If there is hyperactivity, it will manage the activity. That's the quantitative aspect. So deceleration is the quantitative aspects of the indriyas. So all the various indriyas will be heading towards hibernation. So we know our heart rate. Now suppose the heart rate is taken to twice or thrice. Can you have your mind wide and restrained? Pulse rate. You know the pulse rate. Now, if the pulse rate goes by twice or thrice, then you have a quiet mind. You might have a quiet mind. So the pulsations will work on quantitative aspects of indriyas, whether they are hyperactive or hypoactive or hibernated. So the prana will work on that front. It will bring the activity potentials down. It will manage the activity potentials, which is required for quietude and placidity. You can't say I am placid but my abdomen is explosive, having lots of explosions in my abdomen or any organ of the body. So the prana will work on managing the quantitative aspects of the pulsation of every organ. Every organ has a pulsation. Every organ is vibrating. Every organ has inflation, deflation taking place constantly. So that rate is brought down. That's the quantitative aspect. The other one is qualitative aspect. It doesn't mean that the weak people are noble people. Is that right? Those are weak in every organ of the body, every organ of the mind doesn't mean they are noble. They are helpless and helpless. So they can't manifest ignobility, although they are ignoble. So the qualitative aspects are also to be managed, and prana does that as well. It will make the mind more sublime, not just quiet. Understand the difference between quiet mind and sublime mind. The quiet refers to the vibration in the mind, rate of vibration, rate of pulsation, rate of dilatation, distension. That rate will be brought down. But the prana will also work on qualitative aspects. So the mind will become quiet, serene. Just now as I said, a clean mind is sublime mind. You can't have mind cleansed but not sublime. Mind cleansed but impure. That's a qualitative aspect. Pure mind, sedate mind, quiet mind, serene mind, noble mind, sublime mind. So the prana will also work on qualitative aspects. So pranayama will bring down any turbulence in the system, hyperactivity in organic system. So it will bring the placidity there. it will be placidity there, and qualitative aspects, it will be the sublimity there. So the prana is related to all the indriyas. Henceforth, let us not use the word senses or organs. Let's say indriyas. These are all, we are all nothing but assembly of various indriyas, from gross body to subtle body, gross body to subtle mind. Everything is indriyas. Every kind of indriya is there in us. So these indriyas, their rate of, their metabolic rate, their operational rate is brought down. And that's why you say the mind has become quiet. By pranayama, mind has become quiet. And pranayama also will contribute for the mind to become serene. It's not that the mind will become serene because it is quiet. So pranayama will work on both the fronts simultaneously. So there will be convection. Serene mind will become quiet mind. Quiet mind will become serene mind. You understand? So that's the convection. Because it is quiet, it is serene. Now because it is serene, it is quiet. More quiet, more serene, more quiet. So convection is built up. So pranayama works on both the fronts. The qualitative aspects of indriyas and quantitative aspects of indriyas. That's how it is closely related. So that's why pracchardanavidhāraṇābhyāṃ prāṇasya. Because you want the mind to be quiet as well as serene. You just don't want quiet mind. Otherwise, in our dreamless sleep, we all have a quiet mind. In our dreamless sleep, we have a quiet mind. Our organs are also quieted. There are no the earthquakes and volcanoes, turbulence, while we are in dreamless sleep. But that's merely a quiet mind. It doesn't mean that you have a sublime mind in the state of sleep. The sublimity is another thing. So pranayama will work on both the fronts simultaneously, and they will mutually contribute for each other, quantitative aspects and qualitative aspects, tranquility and sublimity. They will mutually contribute for each other and effect an escalation. So that's how the prana works on indriyas. That is, and therefore, when the mind is quiet and still, quiet and sublime, ekatatvabhyasa becomes possible. And after ekatatvabhyasa is possible, what will happen next? Which comes after this topic of chitta parikarma, which is called samavati topic. So the mind will scale huge heights in the realm of supraconscious. That's the word of Aurobindo. So the mind will go into the realm of mysticism. The samadhi etc. will be actualizing. So pranayama, understand how it works. Tatah kshiyate prakacha varnam dharanasya yogyataha manasaḥ. Who effects our attention? So one is that it becomes quiet with the quantitative aspects of its vibrancy. The other one is qualitative aspects of its essence. Essence of the mind. Okay? Or substance of the mind. The substantive state of the mind. The substantive aspect of the mind. Now here we confront dualities. Now substantively we are all eternal, deathless, birthless, ageless. But nowhere it manifests in us. Substantively, we are metaphysical entities. So deathless, birthless, ageless, genderless, stateless, hungerless, thirstless, etc. So understand, substantive state of the chitta is so important, and pranayama will give you substantive state. As you are, essentially. So that's the qualitative aspect of it. And therefore it qualifies for higher practices such as dharana, dhyan, samadhi, dharana, suchi, yogyata, and exhalation plays a very important role for such roles which we have all experienced. That's why pracchardanavidhāraṇābhyāṃ or prāṇasya, pracchardana, vomit. There is no emanative vomit, there is exhalative vomit. And as in vomit, all the toxic aspects go out of the body, of the metabolic body, cellular body. By pranayama, all the toxins of consciousness are vomited. So yoga has introduced this concept of vomit for the sake of psychic consciousness. Otherwise, they are only used to vomit of biological, corporeal aspects. Some dirt in the body, toxins of the body, are thrown out by an act of vomit. We don't have a vomit for psyche. Yoga gives you that vomit of the psyche. So the toxic matter, the mind stuff goes away, mind becomes purified, cultured, seasoned, and therefore sublime.
Before we go to the next sutra, a few things. So I think I said the thing I quoted was Vachaspati Mishra. It's actually Bhoja. It's from Bhoja Vritti. So that's one correction. The other thing was to draw your attention again to the mana-prāṇayoho paraspara yoga kshematvam, and then related to the teachings here and teachings by Guruji for such a long time, where he keeps saying, bring your intelligence there. Right? He said, don't do physical action. Look at me, I bring my intelligence, and through that it happens. So now with this background, we hopefully better understand the reason where we say bring your awareness, bring your breath. Because fundamentally, right in the yogic principles, there is this precept of mana-prāṇayoho paraspara yoga kshematvam, which we need to understand sort of in terms of all the teachings and learnings in our classes as well. Lastly, there is this very beautiful analogy to how this pracchardanavidhāraṇābhyāṃ va prāṇasya is cleaning the chitta. There is a very nice analogy in a mantra of the Amrutanādopanishad. So the mantra is Yatha parvata dhātūnām dahyante dhamata malāha tathendriya krita doshaha dahyante prāṇadhārana. So, yatha parvata dhatuna, the minerals on the rocks, okay? Dahyante dhamata malaha. So, their dirt gets cleaned away by dhamanam. So, dhama means mukhavayunam agnehe sanyogaha. So, the blowing of the flame, right? So, like we have this flame blowers. So, by blowing of the flame, the mineral is cleansed by removing the impurities that are bound to it, right? For the rock minerals. In the same way, indriyakrita doshaha, the dirt that are bound to the chitta due to the sort of the actions of the indriyas. So tathendriyakrita doshaha dahyante, they also get cleansed and blown away by what? Prāṇadhārana. The similar blowing of the flame on the minerals, the similar action is happening here, which is being referred to, and that is how the chitta is being cleansed. Right? So that's a very nice analogy from the Upanishad that relates to this particular sutra.
The layman sometimes says, when there is a dirt, we blow. And the dirt is blown, is that right? So, the common man's perception, the pranayama works like that. That it blows away the dirt. Because the air is such a thing, purifying agent, that when it is heavily flowing, pneumatically flowing, it blows out the dirt. So that's how pranayama, yogi does the pranayama and blows out all the dirt. So it doesn't mean that there is a reference to velocity of it. There is a reference to process of it. Where the breath goes, it will purify. You don't have to be blowing everywhere for the dirt within yourself. You can't be blowing it within you. But then common man's understanding, because of the analogy which comes in the Shastras, they think it's a pranayama is something pneumatic machine for chitta. That will blow away all the dirt.
The mantra in the Upanishad it's not just blowing, it's the blowing of the flame, right? So it is a specific technology being referred to, which sort of corresponds to what is being talked about in the Sutra. Okay, so moving on to 1.35. viṣayavatī va pravṛttirutpannā manasaḥ sthitinibandhanī. So here now this sutra is slightly special in the sense that so far we have been dealing with somewhat pure abstract philosophical notions or actual worldly notions. This for the first time brings in something in between, something somewhat esoteric, somewhat mystic. Okay? So these such mystic and esoteric conceptions of the embodiment and so on are prevalent in many of the yogic texts and many of the Yoga Upanishads and everywhere else. But we don't see them too much in the Yoga Sutras. Okay? Because the Yoga Sutra is more of a darshana text. So there the main aim is to build the philosophical system, not so much the mechanisms and the technology. Okay? But in a few sutras, and somewhat to some extent in the third chapter, we see quite a bit of mystic esoteric things coming in the Yoga Sutras as well. So in our journey so far, probably this is the first one where we are dealing with such concepts, somewhat mystic and esoteric concepts. So let's look at the sutra. viṣayavatī va pravṛttirutpannā manasaḥ sthitinibandhanī. So this, the utpanna viṣayavatī pravṛttihi. So there is a certain pravritti, and we'll see what that is later. But there is a certain pravritti called viṣayavatī pravritti. When this pravritti arises, utpanna viṣayavatī pravritti, what does it do? Manasaḥ sthitinibandhanī. Once again, it binds the manas, the mind, to the state of sthiti. And we already saw what is sthiti. And va indicates that this is another alternative for chitta parikarma. Okay, so as a next alternative, it is the viṣayavatī pravritti arising. viṣayavatī pravritti utpanna manasaḥ sthitinibandhanī. So let's look at the commentary, Vyasa's bhashya. So it says, nasikagre dharayatah asya ya divya gandha samvit sa gandha pravrittihi. So we will now see multiple of these viṣayavatī pravritti. So now he is talking about gandha pravritti. What is it? Nasikagre dharayatah asya divya gandha samvit. So when one sort of confines, right? Dharayatah, there is dharana around the tip of the nose, nasikagre. Okay? What you get is divya gandha samvit. Okay? So gandha is the smell concept, the olfactory concept. Divya, so divine, so it is alaukika. So that is the main point. It is not a regular worldly smell. So divya gandha. Samvit. Samvit means samyak jnanam. Samyak vekti anena iti samvit. Another corresponding word which is more familiar is sakshatkaraha. So the direct perception of true knowledge, like directly seeing. So for example, if the Lord appears before you, you say Sakshat, the Lord is here. So directly you are seeing. It is not through inference or anything else. So here the sakshatkaraha of the divya gandha, the divine smell in some sense, or the essence of the what is the viṣaya called smell. Okay? So there is a shabda, sparsha, rupa, rasa, gandha. So these are the fundamental constituents of viṣayas, of the objects of the senses. Okay? So one of the fundamental constituents is gandha. So the essential understanding of this viṣaya called gandha in its essential alaukic form, right? That when it happens, right, to the chitta, through the nasikagre dharanam, that is called gandha pravrittihi. Okay, so the gandha pravritti by this action is arising in the chitta.
And don't mistake, it doesn't mean that you have to confine your mind to laser tick and it will happen. When the yogin mind gets confined in his samapatti process to tip of the nose. Otherwise, back home, don't try to have your confined on the tip of the nose. Nothing will happen. So, he will be mentioning various such locations. So, when yogi's mind gets confined, not that he confines, not that he confines the mind, like you and me who do it, we'll confine our mind to eyes, we'll confine our mind to nose, a part of the nose, a part of the ear. So, we will do the confinement. No, that is not the case. When his mind gets confined, then he gets divya gandha samvit. Now, before he takes over, the word here is, see, this is a technique to quieten the mind, chitta prasadana, by senses. Why senses? Because the viṣayas are for the senses. Objects are of the senses. That's why we say sensory objects of the nature of shabda, sparsha, rupa, rasa, gandha. Shabda, sound, sparsha, touch, rupa, form, rasa, taste, gandha, smell. So we have 5 objects for 5 senses. Now the sensory processes are being mentioned, and here the word is pravṛtti, not to get carried away by the word in our parlance, common man's parlance. We say that is his pravṛtti, that is his nature. He is an angry person, so to get angry is his pravṛtti. To be passionate is his svabhava, is his pravṛtti. It has not come in that way. Vritti and pravṛtti, it's a technical term. It's a technical term, not a word in common man's parlance. Because the vernacular people are used to this. This is my pravṛtti, that is his pravṛtti. In that sense it has not come. So it is not mentioning about the pravṛtti of the senses. Pravṛtti, prāṇasya, exalted. Because it is going to give you super normal experiences of shabda, sparsha, rupa, rasa, gandha, divya samvit. Divya shabda, divya sparsha, divya rupa, divya rasa, divya gandha. Divya, celestial, divine. So therefore it is pravṛtti. Because what happens particularly when we take recourse to English language and we will take literal translation of the words and we will go by that. We will open the dictionary what is pravṛtti and it will give you some meaning and we will think it is something of that. No, it's not of that. It's a technical term. Secondly, senses. You understand this wonderful kind of scheme of human system. The senses have a direct hotline connectivity with the mind. If I want to make you happy, easiest way is to bring you sensory pleasure, sensual pleasure. The mind will be immediately happy. If I want to sorrow your mind, give sorrow to your mind, again I will give you such a stimulant where the mind will easily get sorrow. Senses are gates which directly go to the mind. Now we are dealing with some kind of mind culturing, mind seasoning. So senses are very important to be addressing the mind because they are direct gates. Others are indirect gates. Now suppose you are getting soothed by whatever you are hearing, whatever we say, we'll go to senses and then it goes to the brain and then you have your thought process, you have grey matter activity, and that grey matter activity will work on your mind. But sensory stimulants are such, they will directly go to the mind. They will directly go to the mind. That's why, that's how they are structured. All the 5 senses here, they are hollows. All their hollows will reach a part medulla oblongata. Just above the neck, the cervical. That's called stem brain. So they all open there. That's why that is called, medulla oblongata is called metropolis of all psychomental activities. It will trigger all kinds of activities. The senses will make you sad, senses will make you happy, senses will make you balanced, senses will give you equity of the mind, equanimity of the mind, sublimity of the mind, or equanimity of the mind. Mind will be disturbed, mind will be settled. It is by sensory stimulus. So senses are gateways for every kind of state of mind that you have. Through the senses you can get sublime state, through the senses you can get ignoble state, low state, malign state. So they are great gateways for the mind. Now usually our senses have viṣayavati. Senses are going after their objects. Senses have enormous gravities towards their objects. Senses are drawn towards their objects. That's called viṣayavati. Sensuality. The senses have sensuality. Here the mention is viṣayavati pravṛttirutpannā. There's a great word introduced by Patanjali, not viṣayika pravṛtti, viṣayavati pravṛtti. Because viṣayika pravṛtti is a natural propensity. Senses have natural propensity, natural gravity, natural inclinations, natural pulls towards their objects, which can be good or bad, noble or ignoble, etc. So it is not interaction of the senses with the objects. They have something going on which is viṣayavati pravṛtti. And yoga explores some technology which I refer to as sensological kriyas. See how much your senses can make you sublime. Now you are all hearing what we are saying. Now try to hear the same, whatever you are now hearing, from your back of the ears, hind ears. The mind will be taking a different shape. As against hearing what I say from the fore ears, front part of the ears. See, our ears are so, if you know about the cattles, they move their ears. Have you seen a cow? It moves the ears. It's a flap. It can move the ears. We can't move our ears like this. It's not a flap. When we are hearing gospel, we hear from particular part of the ears. And when we are hearing gossips, we hear it from another part of the ears. This observation has to be carried out. How do you hear a gossip? How do you hear a gospel? How do you hear when the mind is disturbed? How do you hear when the mind is steady, when the mind is quiet, when the mind is not polarized? It's different acts of the eyes. Mind polarized, it hears differently. It hears from differently. When the mind is depolarized, it hears differently. When the mind is serene and quiet and steady, it hears from this different part. When the mind is unsteady, it will hear from different parts. That's how it will differently go through the system. So the state of the mind will decide how the senses will work. The state of the mind will decide how the senses will work. This is also right with reference to eyes. Mind in various states, eyes will function different states. Eyes are not cameras. The camera will not be having any bias for unsightly object to beautiful, bewitching object. With a camera you can click photographs. It doesn't have its own mind. So it will not react whether the object is unsightly or whether the object is bewitching. Camera will click and will take photograph. That's not the case of our eyes. They are not lenses like that. So state of the mind very much matters. Like going to photography of not today's time, because today it is totally different. Digital photography. In earlier times, they were selecting films for a particular kind of photograph. Still photograph or high speed movement photographs. The films had different speeds, different filters for cameras, for suitable kind of photography. Now today it is digital and most of you, anything you will take a snap by your mobile camera. Happy mood, sad mood, somebody dead, somebody's Preta Yatra, same camera. A child is born, same camera, you click. Camera will not react. But professional photographers, they are not like that, are not like that. They have many cameras with them, many lenses with them, many filters with them, many films loaded in the camera, and they will select a suitable, that one are professional photographers. Here, our mind is something like film in a camera. It should be a suitable film. It should not be incompatible film. It should be a suitable film to have a good photograph. Just being a good photographer, it will not ensure that it is a good photograph. It must be a good camera, it should be good film, suitable film. Mind works like film. Mind works like film. Whatever is the grade of the film. That's how you get your vision or audition. There are filters. Because of filters you will have biased kind of vision or unbiased vision. Partial or impartial vision, etc. So the mind is condition of the senses, where you need not have any doubt. You perceive as your mind is. You don't perceive as the things are. More often you perceive the things as the mind is, not as the things are. That's why you want to have perception in a good state of mind. That's why there is a concept called dispassionate analysis. If you are going for knowledge pursuit, you should be dispassionate. Why dispassionate? For knowledge you must have passion. Unless you have passion, you don't get knowledge. But when the knowledge has to be fructifying, it should be dispassionate knowledge. That means no color influencing the knowledge. Whereas passion is a color by itself. Unless you have passion, you won't have knowledge. You have to be passionate in your knowledge pursuit. Anyway, so if the mind can work on the senses, yogis take the other side of it. They say senses work on the mind, which is also as real as the formal one. Because senses can give you state of mind. If the mind can give the functional process of the senses, senses can also influence the mind. So, in yoga technology, that is used. In what way if you use the eyes, you can have a quiet mind. So in the sensory acts, the technology, outer eyelid awareness. With outer eyelid awareness, your mind will be like panoramic camera. It can take a use of wide angle picture. Zoom in, zoom out. You know that in photography. So if you have outer eye awareness, find out your state of mind will be different. Now also you can try. As you are looking at me, as you are hearing me, have your awareness around extended eyelids. See, the mind will become broad. Get the mind at the nasal end, mind will become narrow. Mind will become narrow. Bottom of the eyes, top of the eyes, center of the eyes, outer edge, inner edge. Ear similarly, hind ear, fore ear, back ear, bottom ear, top ear, center ear. Nose similarly. So look into that book, Sensology Organology, a small pocket book. Nose doesn't get the smell, it has a gesture. If you are getting aroma in the kitchen, how is your nose taking the sensing the aroma? If it's just a fragrance of a flower, of incense, or say scent, how do you take the fragrance? So the nose will work differently. So all the senses have all these mechanisms within them. And therefore here is a technique here, how to use the senses to sublimate the mind. So back home try this. Take a rose flower and look at the rose flower. Try to look at the rose flower from awareness, consciousness centered at the inner end of the nose, nasal end of the eyes. Out eyelid corners, extended eyelid corners, bottom of the eyes, look from bottom eyes. See, when you are depressed, you look from bottom of the eyes. Your awareness is somewhere at the bottom of the eye when you are depressed. When you are excited, awareness goes to the eyebrows. So, there are several sensory acts, and here the reference is made how to use the senses as chitta parikrama. Don't look for a good object necessarily. That is not in our hands. Whether what is in front of you is noble or ignoble, that's not in your hand. Object will come and go. But how to have sensely acts, how to use the senses. And this is how the viṣayavatī pravṛtti comes by senses. Even the not so noble object will become noble object, provided you use the sensory act properly or properly modulated. Then even the object is not noble, you will become noble. Object is ignoble, you won't become ignoble. Like when it's very bright, you put sunglasses. So although it is very, very bright outside, your eyes don't see the brightness. So you only know these goggles, sunglasses, or red and blue and green glasses. So they give us different sensory perceptions. Sometimes they are soothing, sometimes they are pacifying. Now without such glasses, spectacles, eyes itself are to be used, and yoga technology gives it. So this is a viṣayavatī pravṛtti of a yogi. How a yogi can be using the senses. And then it is going to be super celestial kind of a divine kind of sensation. He only refers to tongue and nose, not to eyes, not to ears. Again, the tongue is a marvelous organ which has to be explored. So I will tell you about it.
So just before that, I'll quickly elaborate on some of the points. So one is like you mentioned, the indriya, the viṣaya and the manas and the relation. So there is this famous mantra in the Kathopanishad about looking at us as a chariot. Okay. So atmanam ratanam vidhi, shariram rathamevatu. So the Atma is the master of the chariot, Sharira is the chariot, Buddhirtu Sarathi Vritti. So the Buddhi is the charioteer, and Mana Pragrahanevacha. So the Mana is the rope by which he is holding the horses. Mana Pragrahanevacha. Indriyani Hayanahu. So the Indriyas are like the horses, they want to run. Viṣayasteshu Gocharan. They are sort of running on the road of the Viṣayas. So the Atma and the Buddhi, that is again a very interesting area, but not our topic currently. So currently we are looking at Mana as a Pragraha, Indriyas as the horses, the Viṣaya as the Gochar. Okay? And therefore when you see if the Indriyas go out of hand, they are going to pull the rope with them. And that is where the influence of the Indriyas on the Manas, that is coming in. Because that gets pulled by the horses. Where are the horses running? They are running on the path of the Viṣayas. Right? So there is a link between the Indriyas and the Viṣayas. Okay? And then Atmendriya Manoryuktam Bhoktetyahu Manishinaha. So the Bhokta or the person in this world is made up of this Atma, Indriya and Mana and everything combined as this conception of a chariot. So that very cleanly brings out the points that are coming out here about the relation between the manas, the indriya and the viṣayas. The other thing he mentioned was pravṛtti. And pravṛtti is a technical term and not the usual meaning of pravṛtti. So in the Shankara Vivaranam, there is a very good sort of definition of pravṛtti which says yogam abhyasyataha yoginaha. So a yogi who is practicing, studying yoga, tasya prathamaha abhimukhi bhavaha. So his first point where he comes face to face inwards with this path of yoga, pratyaya karanaha, where the pratyaya or the knowledge imprint of what this path of yoga means, that realization comes to him. Yoganushtanam pratyutsaha jananaha. So this brings about sort of the enthusiasm coming back. So the yogi begins with a lot of enthusiasm about, oh, I want to study yoga and so on. When that reflects back and he gets the realization of he gets the reverse sensation of the enthusiasm because his efforts are having a real effect, which is directly perceptible in the path of yoga. Like for example, here Divya Gandha Samvit. Suppose it really happens. For him, that is the first example of some alaukika, out of this world experience happening to him. That pratyutsaha jananaha yaha bhavaha sa pravṛttihi. So that is what is pravṛtti. And here the specific pravṛtti that we saw was gandha pravṛtti, which gives the essential vishaya sakshatkara of the gandha, the smell aspect of the vishaya element. So I'll quickly mention the sort of the positions, like he said, for the other pravrittis, and then we'll stop. So this is what we saw: nasikagre gandha pravritti, jivmagre rasa samvit. So the rasa, the element of taste. So that is jivmagre, tip of the tongue. Taluni rupa samvit. So rupa is a form, so the visual aspect. Sorry. Okay, so that is happening in the talu. So talu is sort of the roof, the palate of the mouth. To be very particular, when we say cha, cha, ja, jha, so those varnas where the tongue is touching the roof of the mouth, that area is called talu. And taluni dharayataha yoginaha rupa samvit. So that is where you are getting rupa sakshat. Jimma madhye sparsha samvit. So the jimma madhye, so jimma is tongue, madhye is sort of the middle. So in the middle of the tongue there is sparsha. Sparsha means touch. So samvit is sakshatkar. So the direct perception of the essential vishaya of sparsha or touch happens at jimma madhye. And jimma mule, so at the root of the tongue, shabda samvit. Okay. So these are the areas. Then we'll see next time vityetaha, viṣayavatī, because that is another sort of it needs a lot of explanation. But this is sort of the coverage of the various places for the various essential vishayas as part of this viṣayavatī pravṛtti.
So we know that there are taste buds in tongue, various parts in the taste buds. The wisdom buds are also in tongue. That is why the wisdom goddess is said to be residing in the mouth. Although it is spitful part of our mouth, which is disgusting for ourselves, she resides there. Because in esoterics, the tongue is locus, or it has the buds for all higher wisdom. That's why we say somebody's Saraswati, we say it is in the tongue. We don't say Saraswati is in somebody's brain. Saraswati, we say it manifests on the tongue. So the tongue has also various layers as far as its status is concerned. This is the highest status of it, where there's only the four samvits are in the tongue. That's how the tongue is. To what we are made of our tongue now.
So we'll stop here. There is quite a bit of further explanation to go for the sutra, which we will continue next time. Question answer Question answer time is done. Okay, so we'll recite the shlokas on Guruji and then we'll wait for in case of any questions. वैज्ञानिक शिक्षकत्वे कलाकार आसनेषु यः योगाभ्यासे च तत्त्वज्ञः वन्दे सुन्दरं गुरुम् योगवृक्षो लोकेऽस्मिन् वर्धितो यस्य प्रेरणया योगाचार्याय गुरवे सुन्दराय नमो नमः.
Any questions? Yeah.
Some of the senses, so many a times, all the time, get control over the senses is difficult. So I was reading about it. So I read somewhere where it said that okay, first you become friends to the senses. Once you become friends to the senses, then you start improving on them. But when I was hearing you, and when you just told us that the eyes part of it. If you just see on your outer side of your eyes or the above side when you are excited. So just realize more than being a friend to the senses. If I don't know the senses, how am I going to work on them? So you can just elaborate on it.
In fact, becoming friend of senses is highly dangerous proposition. There is nothing like sensory control. You can't be whiplashing the senses. They will come back with a rock with double forces, and that's also dangerous. Sensory control is a different notion when it comes to the concept of just sensory control. It's not control. The senses must be under a spell for them to behave well. Create a proper spell for the senses. Then the senses will not misbehave. Otherwise, they are like mad horses, drunken horses, as we heard from Upanishad. They are like drunken horses. And then even controlling them, like it's just a metaphor used there, but process is there for the spell cast over the senses. What is the way out? Sat-sanga. That is why the importance of sat-sanga. The senses will become more orderly, the senses will become more organized in a sat-sanga kind of situation. And that's why in Adhyatma sat-sanga has that importance. Then it is assisted by sadhana and shastra sanghas. So sangha trayas are important to control the senses. Don't try to go for a whiplash. Tabuk, kukla sabuk or senses samani. You can't be going for whiplash. Search for such a hunter to get behind your senses. That won't be the way. Nor can you put the reins of the senses. Like when the horse, it can be stopped by pulling the reins from the horse. It will stop. It won't stop like that. Senses won't stop like that. Because they are tendencies. Horses are not tendencies. Horses are animals. So, Sat-sanga will reform the senses. That is important. So that's why in the practical aspects, yoga speaks of Sat-sanga, Sadhana sanga, Shastra sanga, Sattvic ahar vihar achar vichar. When the sattva casts a spell, then the senses will become weedy. Then they will become weedy, not otherwise. You can't have a hunter, etc., and say the senses will be made weedy sooner or later. That's not possible. So sensory control means there are such things. See, when somebody says, please control your child. Now, child is 2-3 years of age. What are you going to do? How will you control your child? Now, the same child is 12-13 years of old. You can spank the child. Or you can really get a hunter and hit the child. The child is 18, 19, 20. Control the child. Please control your child. What will you do? So between the age of 2-4 years of age and then 18, 19 years of age, the control are different propositions. There are different needs to be controlling a child between being a baby and being. For a baby, what will you do? You will entice the baby. You will show the chocolate and lead the child away from where it is committing some what do you call naughtiness. When the child is naughty, what will you do? You will entice the child. You can't hit the child and say, don't do this. So similarly about sentences it should be understood. What's the mode of it? Control the mind. You hear in Adhyatma, spirituality. What is controlling the mind? How do you control the mind? Control the senses. How do you control the senses? So, if You can't be doing policing. And then you can't be building a hunter, etc. So there are different ways. You have to understand what is this and how to control it. This is a baby. How will I wean it away from it being naughty or being cranky? What will you do? You can't scold up the child. You can't beat up the child. You do something else. Similarly, what to do for mind. So this is what satsanga will tell you. And satsanga will do it. That's why satsanga in Adhyatma is so important. And then it is assisted by sadhana and shastra sadhana. So we will get now what I mentioned about. It's part of sadhana, how to do that. It's a technical aspect. So sensely acts will tell you about it. If you have observations, you will get your lesson. Text of yoga did not tell you. We don't have observations. Then we are going through a pavement and dirty smell, a noxious smell is coming. How do we close the nose? How long can we close the nose? When we can't close the nose yet, we give a gesture to the nose and then we walk to the pavement. Suppose you are going to get that obnoxious smell for 5 minutes. Are you going to hold breath for 5 minutes? You can't. So, what do you do? How do you breathe? It's a different kind of use of the nose nostrils for breathing or to avoid the stimulation of obnoxious smell to your smell center in the brain. So these are observations. So I have put a questionnaire there in the book. So try to go through it. I said, how do we use the ears for different purposes, different conditions. See, I said gospel and gossips. There are gossips which you don't want to hear, yet they will fall on your ears. You can close your eyes. Can you close your ears? You can't close your ears. You have to close your eyes. So gossip that you don't want to hear, it is heard. How do you hear? Observe it. Gossip that you want to hear, but you can't hear, how do you hear? It's a different way to hear. Gospel, how do you hear? Maybe gospel you don't want to hear, maybe it was of ears. How do you hear? You can't say, I did not hear. I did not hear it at all. It will be falling on ears, you don't want to hear. How do you hear when you don't want to hear a gospel? How do you hear when you want to hear a gospel? How do you hear a gospel which you are not able to hear but you want to hear? Different ways and means. Now today the problem doesn't come because there are amplifiers. And that's why you won't get conditions such as I can't hear. But otherwise it happens. You can't hear but you want to hear. And it's a gospel that you want to hear. So we use the eyes, ears and various senses differently. Just have observation, just have a survey of it. How do I engage my senses for different kinds of actions? In different states of mind and different conditions around. How do I use it? And we don't do the observation. So that observation will teach a lot. That's why I stress on observation in yoga. You need to observe a lot. Imagine your eyes in Natarajasana. Imagine your eyes in Hathalasana. We just lost the understanding. I can close the eyes, I can close the eyes, I can relax the eyes. You can also relax the eyes in Natarajasana. You are supposed to relax your eyes in Natarajasana. How will you relax your eyes? What is that relaxation of eyes in Natarajasana? If you are proficient, how is relaxation of the eyes in Halasana? So these are different usages of the muscles of the eyes, nerves of the eyes, matter of the eyes, mind behind the eyes. So the observation is very important. Then we will get some clue to this sutra. For us, we should try that. Okay. So when the tongue is released. But when you are apprehensive, you do not know, you have never seen this eatable thing, never before. When you are apprehensive, you don't gulp it in your mouth. You don't just gobble in your mouth. How do you do? Taste it. Will I like it? If I like it, then I will gobble it and stuff it down the throat. But if I don't like it, I will refuse. So how do we do acts? This observation is really a marvel. We ourselves are unknown to us. we need to know ourselves. How to act, react, respond, participate, involve. Objectively, we have to look at ourselves. How did I participate? How am I participating? If I am willingly participating, how am I participating? You must objectify your own mind. We objectify others' mind. We look at somebody else, how this person is involved, how this person is participating, and we have analysis of it. But from a corner of the mind, we can watch ourselves. How are we participating? And how should we be participating? So this observation is master key to yoga. Most of the things will be open for you if you have this auto-observation. Learn to observe oneself rather than observing people around, things around all the time. Yoga gives you condition to observe yourself. Its key makes you objectify your own mind and consciousness. Drashtro Drishyopattam Chittam Sarvatham, fourth chapter. How do I know myself? This is a question asked by a Calvin. You say you must know yourself. How will I know myself? Our chitta is such. It will know the knowable, it will know the knower. Human mind knows, I am angry, I will know. Some humans don't know that they are angry because they are only angry. I will know I am angry, I know I am crazy, I will know I am passionate. They do not know. Our brain is such, so constituted that you will be able to know your own mind. Some humans don't know their mind. Cat will never know that it is angry. Tiger will never know it is angry. It will be angry. It is so much angry that there is no part of it left to be knowing that I am angry lion. Whereas in our case, we can have this part of mind, I am angry person. Now I am angry. Now I am delirious. This can be known. If it is overflowing condition, then you will not know. If you are so angry that you will not know that you are angry. You are so under obsession or delusion, you will not know that you are delusion. But if it is a partial kind of thing, you will certainly know that you are deluded. That's a gift to mankind for man to reform. If that is not there, then you can't reform. Like the lions and tigers and horses have been the same for multiple millennia. Horse has been horse. We are not like that. How were our ancestors 10,000 years back and how are we today? Horse has been the same from 10,000 years. Bullocks and cows have been the same. Cats and dogs have been the same for 10,000 years, 100,000 years. We are not the same. It is because we are reformable, because we have this positive condition of strict mind. We only know negative condition of strict mind. Our mind can know knower. Anyway, that's part of Srineet Sridharan. Long way from there. Thank you.
Thank you.